Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we sit around, we hang out, we talk about games, things that are beautiful, things that are exciting, things that are enjoyable about gaming, board games, role-playing games, card games, video games, mainly role-playing games. I haven't done a board game review in a while, but I may need to change that up. I've got some miniature stuff that once I finish getting painted, I'll be able to share. But today we're talking about mainly role-playing games. Thank you to Tink for the band hammer. Hot damn, that was awesome. Good morning to John and Tink, Padre, and everyone else who's watching this. Today we're talking about playtesting. This actually came out of getting to hang out with John Doom just last week. Just last week, John, you were sitting there. Because we were talking about playtesting, and I am a huge believer in playtesting games. If you don't playtest games, how do I want to put this? I am concerned that there are game designers who intellectually think their game is good, but have not actually playtested it. And I think that's a horrible thing. I understand why. Trying to get stuff out, we're trying to get stuff rolling. We may be under a deadline and may not have time to do a rigorous playtest, but I think playtesting is super important. The fact that I had the pleasure of hanging out with, when I lived in Colorado, S. John Ross, who is a great game designer. Worked on a lot of GURPS materials, worked on a lot of different things. Ghostbusters RPG, Innomine, as well as his own Rhesus, the 2-page role-playing game is his, and several other things. And he always said, listen, it's not just enough to play test your games. You need to blind play test your games. So we kind of talked a little bit about that last Tuesday before John and I went up and had one of the best burgers I've ever had in my life. If you're ever in Plano, check out Rodeo Goat. Went there yesterday for another meeting. It's really good. And John has had the pleasure of being involved in several playtests, both for the Han Cluster as well as part of the Wrecking Crew, which is if you are in the design space, you know that the Wrecking Crew is one of the big playtest groups for World of Darkness. That's what I'm trying to say. Jackal's benefited from a lot of blind playtesting. So we're going to talk about playtesting. If you're a game designer, this is really important for you. And then I'm going to help players because there's a lot more companies, either through Patreon, like Autark, or Kickstarter, giving out pre-release copies. Whether you have massive playtests like the next edition of Dungeons & Dragons or the open beta for Tales of the Valiant when it was live, or Daggerheart, the new Critical Role game, a lot more companies are feeling a lot more comfortable with giving us, the gamers and the GMs who are going to buy their game, you are going to get playtests, and you get to help give feedback that the designers are hopefully going to see. I have just worked with a massive project with 13th Age for 13th Age 2nd Edition, which is coming out soon to Kickstarter. And man, we got so much playtest data, and I'm going to let you know, we looked at it. I was in charge of reading every playtest comment and distilling it down into discrete packages that Rob and Jonathan could ingest. So let's start with, why as a designer would I want my game playtested? Well, the easiest thing is, the more I play it, the more I'm going to see the rough spots in the game and be able to sand them down and smooth them off. I'm going to get a better designed game. I think as a game designer, your number one thing you should be doing is playing your game. If you're not playing your game, if you are writing it in an academic or intellectual vacuum, you are doing yourself and your customers a disservice. Additionally, Daniel Fox said that all designers should be playing their games to the point that they end up having a ton of house rules, which is how you get the next edition. No one should be playing the game as written. I don't play Jackals the way as written now after playing it for 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years. I have my own set of house rules, and if I ever get to do Jackals second edition, some of those will make them into the final playtest, or the final packet for Vendom at the very least. It's important for you to play the game that you are writing and to play it with people who know how to playtest. Morning, Mark. Padre, I've not been to either of those, but it was a 50-50 beef chorizo burger with a fried egg, Tabasco mayo, Fresno pepper aioli, and bacon and guacamole on it. It was delicious. So that's how playtesting works. You just sit down with your group, you run through the adventure, you run through your game system, you take notes, you ask. One of the key things is always asking players at the end of the session, not whether they had fun, but what worked and what didn't. If you're like me, I approach it very systematically. I did like high-level playtests for Jackals, where I tested the toughest monsters against wildly advanced characters. And I had several questions coming in, like, did you feel more powerful? Did the monster feel too tough, tough enough, not tough enough? Were these abilities, did they feel balanced? When you're playing through a new game system, you want to have spotlights and questions specifically, give them at the start of the playtest session and then ask them at the end of the playtest session. Do seasonal actions work? Was there enough options for you? Do you feel like they were engaging? Does this new mechanic for weapons work? How do you like how I'm handling skills? All of these can be guided at your table. But S. John's comment about blind playtesting is really important, and this is how it works with all of the bib publications. Daggerheart, next edition of Dungeons & Dragons, all of the ones I mentioned. You need to give your adventure or your new game into the hands of people who don't play at your table, and that is super scary. I get it. But the only way you're going to find out if your game runs the way you want it to run, the way you hope it's going to run, is to hand it to people who know nothing about you and say, here are the rules. Here's an adventure, run it. Here's a list of 10 to 15 questions that I want you to go over before you play and answer them at the end of the session, at the end of the adventure, at the end of your little mini campaign. That's why Jackals doesn't have values for locks. My original game design that I thought was super slick was everything was a opposed roll. Everything in Jackals was a clash roll. And every blind playtest group came back saying they hated it. Every one of them. Which is why now we have the difficulty step chart, which is more elegant game design. I'd be willing to sacrifice some of your sacred cows. The last thing is when you're running an adventure that you're writing, be willing and tell your group, hey, this is the key encounter that we're playing through tonight. I need to make sure it's fairly balanced, so I'm going to run it 2 or 3 times. If you have a TPK, let's run it again. Let's reset. Was it the die rolls? Was it bad decision making? Was there something occluded that should have been more often front and center? John, make your bullet points and then playtest it and give it another right. So let's talk about the player side, because here's the thing. One of the fun things about being in a playtest group is you get to try new games or new versions or new editions of your games before they actually hit the market. There's going to be something like this for the Sci-Fi Companion, as they're going to roll out different chapters and let people play with them and break them and give them feedback. It's why the companions take so long for Pinnacle to get out, because there's so much to play test. So, If you're a GM and you like this idea, and you're like, hey, I would like to see advanced copies of games. How do I do this? Well, first you need to participate in an open beta. It's the easiest way to get started. Or if you're on a great server like the unofficial Savage Worlds Discord server, say, hey, my group is open for playtest if anybody wants to do this. One, make yourself available. The more playtests you are a part of, and the better feedback you are, the better you are at distilling your feedback and giving it back to the company, those are the names that rise to the top. Those are the names that get taken more seriously and are contacted when new material comes out. It's the reason why playtest groups like the Wrecking Crew show up in so many World of Darkness books. So what do you need as a GM and as a group of players to make a good playtest group? Well, first you need to have a desire to play a bunch of different games. Because the whole point is that you're going to playtest a game for however long they're going to let you playtest it. And then in theory, you're going to submit that material back and you're going to be done. Go to a different game to playtest or go back to your regular group. 2, you need to keep your mouth shut. Let me repeat that. You need to keep your mouth shut. Most, not open betas, but most playtest groups have to sign an NDA. And there is nothing that will kill your playtest group faster than someone finding out you violated an NDA. We're not that large of a community. Ben Franklin was right. 2 people can keep a secret as long as one of them is dead. So what are you going to do when you have a big group? Just remind people this is a privilege that can be revoked. And I have seen it revoked. I have seen other actions taken against playtest groups that I will not go into, but it is not a good thing and you need to keep your mouth shut. Where was I? Oh yeah, what makes a good playtest group? Padre is correct. And John is correct. You need a game breaker. You need a lot of different people. You need the people who are most of your group are going to be people who are just excited to try something new. Because they like the genre, they like the company, they like the GM. Because let's be honest, most of my playtests are games that I'm writing and I want my friends to give me feedback on it. Because it's easier to get feedback from your friends at first. But you need a couple of system monkeys. Mark is a great example. Mark's a great system monkey. I think back to our Shadowrun games, and you had all of your characters just humming perfectly. You need somebody who can look at a game and go, I can break this. And you want that. You want to see where the game is broken so that you can adjust things and bring them back into scope. I'm not saying that the game has to be perfectly balanced, but if there's one thing that everybody agrees this is a must take, you might want to scale it back, change it up. You want people who they don't have to be talkative, but they have to be articulate. They have to be able to reflect on what they just played and give you something more than, yeah, it was good. Or, yeah, I didn't like that. Well, why? And then for me personally, I like having a note taker. I like having one person designated because the GM is trying to remember all of these new rules, all of these new systems, all of this new lore. Have someone whose job is to record what the group is saying, even if that's just turning your voice notes on at the end of the session. So, what kind of feedback is good to distill and send back? Well, things that I always like to look for first when I'm going through playtest notes. Is there anything that people are like, I hate this? And why did they hate that? Is it too complicated? Is there a simpler or better way to do it? Is it just too confusing? Which leads into the second thing, like point out points of confusion, points out things where you had to reread multiple times, point out things where you're like, this doesn't make sense with the theme, or what came before, or it doesn't really integrate into other things. Yes, Mark, the whole get the question list. Like, as playtesters, like, playtest documents usually come with, hey, here is what we are looking for. If no notes, then at least the drawing the session. Yeah, we do have someone in our 13th Age 2 playtest who takes up about a third of my table, which has a glass topper on it, and then just draws her mind map for the session, and then we take pictures of it and post in the notes. The other thing you have to be okay with, and this is a key thing for a playtest group, you have to be okay with change. Playing a barbarian, and suddenly a new packet comes to the GM, and he's like, hey, the barbarian is completely different. I need you to, like, absorb this. I'm sorry, the sorcerer has radically changed. All of those things you liked are now out. Here's a bunch of new things that are in. That spell that you keep milking, or that ability that you keep pressing, it's different now. It's nerfed. You got some new options. It can be frustrating for a group. It can be frustrating for a player. That's why not every group is a good playtest group. If you're sitting there going, man, my group wouldn't be a good playtest group, but I would really like to do something like this, that means you're probably a good candidate to be a playtesting GM. Yes, John, these are all points that John and I talked about. A lot of this is being cribbed from a great conversation John and I had. Yeah. What in the sequence led to confusion? Is there a rule buried somewhere that I need a cheat sheet for, or a summary, or a clarification? John and I were looking at the Werewolf 5th edition book, and one of the greatest, this is going to be my takeaway going forward, is at the end of every rules section, they had a 5 bullet point or less summary of that rules section. So as the GM, if you're like, I know this rule is here and it's somewhere in this section, you can hit the summary and hit the bullet points. Yes, Padre, don't be afraid to kill your darlings. Several of them were brutally murdered by blind playtest groups. And then again, that conversation I keep referring to that my wife had about how criticals needed to work. They needed to work better. That's what playtesting does. And the best thing is, good playtesters are worth their weight in gold. And you will be surprised at how well designers respond to good playtest feedback. To my best playtest group, my best blind playtest group, I sent copies of the book, because the book of Jackals would not be as good if it wasn't for that group. Good playtest groups form relationships with designers because of how succinct and specific their playtest feedback is. I know there are about a half dozen playtesters from 13th Age that Rob puts their feedback all the way to the top of the list, and that's the first stuff that he looks at, and he takes that under serious advisement. So yeah, this was more of a designer and group discussion, but I hope this was useful for you. If you are out there and want to do playtesting, get involved in open betas. Get involved in... I know Modifius runs a lot of, hey, if you sign up, you can be a part of the beta. And they take their feedback process very seriously. They do the thing where they're segmenting out, here's what we're discussing for this 2 weeks. Here's when your playtest data is due. As a designer, give hard deadlines. As a playtest group, answer the questions the designer wants and meet those deadlines. I got a bunch of feedback after Jackals was published from playtest groups. It's worthless to me. So, that is playtesting. I hope you guys found this interesting and enjoyable. If you found this on YouTube, I hope that you can put some of this into practice. Or if you're a designer, I hope you find this helpful for getting together the groups that you're going to need to make your game the best that it possibly can be. I am going to be off on Thursday. I will be out in Ann Arbor at Chaosium Con. If you're out there and you see a guy who looks generally like this, it's probably me. You can come up and say hi. I am looking forward to hanging out, chatting. I will be on a panel for a Greg Stafford interview video that I got to put together, which was just a wonderful time. John, Padre, thanks for that. Mark, Tink, always good to see you. To the guy we banned who will never hear this again, don't be a spam bot. Go out and play some games. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Until then, have a good one.